So I don't normally review PC tech on this channel, and this is my first GPU review, thanks to Colourful, who sent me this review unit here. So it is the iGame 1080 Ti Vulcan AD. Bit of a mouthful, but it's another custom 1080 Ti. So I'll be putting this card through its paces here. In my review, I'll cover some synthetic gaming benchmarks. I will also test out some games and compare the performance of this compared to my other graphics cards that I own. Now in my test, I'm going to be testing out 4K gaming on the highest settings, so Ultra. I feel that most people, if they bought a card like this, would probably be gaming in ultra wide or 4K, or they want to always push Ultra settings and get the best visuals possible. So in the box you get a typical instruction manual in Chinese and in English, software and driver CD, but you download the latest NVIDIA drivers anyway. You get this tiny little black pouch as well, which contains some cable management ties, 2 anti-static installation gloves, can't say I've seen that before, a little screwdriver for installation as well, and then an iGame keyring. So the iGame logo there, that's RGB, you can customize that with lighting with their software. We've got 3 fans, so similar to the WindForce or other graphics cards as well, the custom ones you see out there. And this outer frame here, that's made out of metal. So the 2 outer fans are 9 centimeters in diameter, and then we have a slightly smaller 8 centimeter middle fan with these cooling fins around the outside of it, and this also has RGB lighting. 2 8-pin power connectors. So for ports on the back, we have 1 DVI port, 3 display ports, 1 HDMI 2.0B spec port, and you'll notice that there's this little button here, which I honestly feel they don't need, and that's normal and turbo modes, but most people would just leave this always in turbo. And like pretty much every single custom 1080 Ti, there's a metal backing plate on it, so the PCB shouldn't warp, and it's very solid. And of course you notice that there's the connector up the top there, that's for our SLI bridge. Now for those with small cases, the length of this card, it is not exactly the shortest card, very long. And you'll see you need around approximately 30 centimeters of space inside your case. So the card has in total 10 copper cooling pipes, heat transfer pipes. We've got 4 on one side, 6 on the other, and that's used of course in conjunction with those cooling fins and the 3 fans to keep things cool. So the spec of PC I'm running for this test is an AMD Ryzen 1700. Now I've overclocked it to 3.9 GHz. Really great CPU for the price. It's an octa-core, and I have that paired out with 32 GB of G.Skill Trident RAM, which is running at 3 GHz. Now you'll see that the CPU is water cooled. Now this is a Corsair H60. The motherboard's rather cheap. It's an ASUS Prime B350 Plus. And the power supply I have in this machine right here too is a 650 watt one from EVGA, which is the bare minimum really that you want to be running with this type of card. So what about fan noise and coil whine? I'll give you a sample here, but you can hear some coil whine, definitely when you've got VSync disabled. When you enable VSync, the coil whine literally just disappears, but I'll give you a sample of it now under full load. Now when it comes to overclocking this card, I can't actually push it really that much higher without touching the core voltage. I managed to get a stable plus 30 megahertz to the core clock, which is not a lot at all, and a very decent 600 megahertz more on the memory clock there. So what this has done to the scores here, so this is the default factory turbo score here, so 6,972, and once I overclock that now, Firestrike Ultra in 4K has now gone up to 7,297, so it's a very marginal increase here, and probably really not worth the hassle overclocking this particular card, or the core clock that is at least. Now I did test out what that little turbo button does. So what it does, it changes the BIOS. So we've got an overclock BIOS and then a standard one, and the difference between them in clocks you can see here is quite significant. So this right here is the button off, so when it's pushed in, and you can see here the maximum boost there is 1582, and then when you have that enabled, which I personally would just always leave it enabled. I don't know why you would want to actually underclock it. You've got a 1080 Ti, you want maximum performance, that's what you're paying for. Then that clock of course goes now to 1709, which seems fairly decent, and I'm not going to touch it. I'm just going to always leave it in that turbo mode there. Now when it comes to thermals, out of all of the games I have tested and the whole time I've been benchmarking this card, I have never seen it go over 74 degrees. And that was even with my minor little overclock of 30 megahertz. So thermals are really good on this card. Never had a problem with them. And the fan noise, quite good as well. So there we go. As you can see, that this is a super powerful card and a true 4K and ultra wide gaming card at that, because we had an average of over 60 frames per second on all of the games I tested running in 4K with the ultra or highest possible settings there, which is really remarkable and something. And you can see that this is a nice step up from my 1080 that I have here. So in terms of build quality, it's very good, very solid, this card. We do have the rear backing plate on there that I showed you at the start, metal frame around here to protect the fans and everything. Now there's plastic on my ASUS card here, which isn't that great, but it is a quality plastic they have used on that one. Now it does have RGB lighting that's around this fan here, and then the iGame logo on the top. But unfortunately, the crappy software that I have didn't let me run it properly or even install it correctly. So I could not show you that in this video here. And I went onto their official website, which is in English, Colorful's website, and I could not download any software for that from their website, which hopefully will be corrected soon there. So we can at least control the lighting on here for those of you that want to run, for example, this middle fan or the logo in blue to match the rest of your theme of your system you have in your tower PC. Now there is of course that little switch on the side. I believe that this is really just a gimmick. Colorful don't need to have this on here at all, because everyone's going to be running this in the turbo mode and not the standard mode, because standard mode's a lot slower. And who's buying a 1080 Ti to run it underclocked or at slower clocks? No one is, so that's really just a pointless feature there. So it does retail for about $830 US, but you must import it of course from China, which is a bit of a con there too, that you have to bear in mind that you may be subject to import taxes, and if you do have a problem with it, then it needs to be sent back to China for repairs or replacement. Now my unit, the fan noise, very good. It gets up to around 50 decibels at max there, and the cooling works really well. Did not go over 74 degrees Celsius. Now the coil whine is only obvious in an issue really when you're running super high frames per second. And I'm talking like running 300 frames per second. You will hear this coil whine, that high-pitched noise from that sample I gave you. Now the same happens on my 1080 as well, that when I have VSync on, not a problem. VSync on with this, it's not a problem either. And if you do have VSync off and the frame rate is under 100 frames per second or under 150, coil whine then is a non-issue. But if you do plan to run Counter-Strike at say 300 frames per second or 250, then you're going to hear some coil whine on this. And hopefully over time, that will die down, but it is not an issue on this card here. It was on this. This is actually my second one I got, because the first card I had a lot of really high-pitched coil whine on this ASUS 1080 Strix. So that one was replaced, and this card is perfectly fine. So overall, a really great card here, and it only has those minor cons with the RGB lighting and really the software support there with the website that you can't download that software on it. But really good card, amazing performance there. So if you are into 4K gaming or ultra-wide gaming, definitely look for a 1080 Ti, one like this right here. Thanks a lot for watching this review, and I do hope to see you back in the channel soon with my typical reviews on tablets, mobile phones, and various other gadgets and things, mostly from China.